Hi everyone, it's Lauren Hubele here, and I'm back with How We Heal, the place where we bring together Asian medicine, polyvagal theory, and gemmotherapy to help you along your personal path of healing. Today, I welcome back my co-host, Megan Limp. Megan, good to see you.
Hi, it's great to be with you again.
And Cameron Scott.
Wonderful to be here. And my cat, who just needed some co-regulation, has decided to join us, if however briefly. Her name's Katie.
Katie, we have a new co-host here. This is wonderful. The group is growing. So, ladies, I'm really excited about our topic today, particularly because it was one that was very obscure to me until I could start seeing it in action. And once I did, I have to really say to you, it's been a total game changer for me. And in my time in Europe, I found it showing up again and again. And that is the idea of bringing in the ingredients of context, choice, and co regulation in order to help me feel safe in situations that might feel a little awkward otherwise. And I'm really excited that you both are willing to share some personal examples with our listeners today. I think everyone can benefit from that. And I want to extend this encouragement to our listeners that of the simplicity of this. It seems utterly ridiculous that something so simple can change a situation, but I think we all can attest to the fact that it is a game changer. Megan, I know you had a real interesting example. Can you share a little bit with our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so grateful that you're inviting in this conversation about context, choice, and connection, because, in reflecting on how polyvagal theory has affected my personal and professional life, I realized that it has there's some freedom in understanding the why, because it gives us a greater sense of self-awareness and a greater sense of awareness about what's going on with our loved ones. And so it's offered me the why, not only of understanding myself in the sense of how I get dysregulated, but also understanding the why of when those glimmers, as Cameron says, or those moments of regulation happen, understanding and having the self-awareness of why I do feel safe and regulated sometimes. And so I love the exploration of this, because this isn't something that I'm hearing too many other people dive deep into. And I would love to understand more about why I feel safe. So I would like to invite you in to this little sacred space that I hold in my life. And that is the time that I spend early in the morning with a few dear friends exercising. And this is a space that I was invited into, I'm not sure if it was maybe 5 years ago or 6 years ago, but a number of years ago, some friends that I had met in our neighborhood here in St. Louis, I knew that they were getting up ridiculously early and exercising together and having a cup of tea or coffee or something. And they had invited me a few times, and I thought the world of these people, but I really didn't want to get up before the sun rose and exercise. That was a no for me. But it was somebody's birthday, and I went. And the connection piece was immediate. There was this resonance, and I felt safe, and I felt inspired, and I felt like I wanted to have this piece in my life where I could connect with this wonderful group of women. But the other two pieces of it, the context and the choice, were still a no for me. And it has been this beautiful, interesting journey to it transforming, and these pieces, the context, choice, and connection, all coming online. And that's where I am today. And so I've watched my journey with this into what has now feels like one of the safest places in my life. So the connection piece was immediate for me. But the context felt, I was neurocepting. No, I didn't want to get up early, and I didn't want to pound the pavement and do something that felt unsafe to my body. But as I started to explore it, I decided to just explore it a few times. And the way that I felt afterwards, we all talk about endorphins and adrenaline, but there was something more than that. And what I realized was that the second piece came online for me, and that was the context. And for me, this particular context had a lot to do with my body and what it is like to feel safe in my body. And it had a lot to do with my sense of proprioception, I believe, now looking back on it, which essentially, without being fancy, I have come to learn is how my body interacts with the space that it's in and how I sense that. And I seem to be somebody who craves and finds safety when I have a sense of my proprioceptive sense. So where my body is in space, where I have a sense of that. So that feels like burying myself under covers and wrapping myself in blankets sometimes. Sometimes it feels like massage or deep pressure. And in this case, this rhythm of walking or jogging seemed to create this sense in my body that started to create regulation and calm. But it was an active calm, and it was a rhythmic calm. And the context came online for me that my body started saying yes to that. And I didn't feel pressure. I wasn't training for anything. I didn't have any goals in it. But I went out there and my body started to relax and feel energized and say yes. And then the third piece of choice just naturally came for me because I decided that this didn't have to be an obligation, that this was a safe place and an inspired place that I would offer to myself. And the choice became yes. And on days when the choice is no, I don't go.
Sure.
So anyway, here I have this beautiful early morning ritual that transformed from something that didn't feel safe into something that really, really is nourishing for me.
Oh, wow, Megan. I can see you've really reflected on that. Has it just been recently that all this has come together in your mind, that you've seen what this does for you?
So again, I knew that I could have told you a few years ago that this is nourishing and that this is a yes for me, that all the parts of my being, that my body and my mind and my spirit all say yes to this, but I don't think that I understood why. And again, I was okay with that. But the self-awareness of the components for me now help me and translate to other parts of my life that I know the ingredients that lead to me feeling safe and nourished.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, this body, mind, and spirit all saying yes is huge, and it relates to a top before recording conversation. Cameron and I were saying, and I think in the times that we're living in right now, checking in with those, it's so important. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. Thanks for that share, Megan. Cameron, what does this mean to you?
Uh, so much, and particularly just looking back at my recent few days, because this is the stuff I teach. This is the stuff I hold with other people. This is something I work with very actively, and especially it's more often my place to hold the context, the choice and connection. And on small scale, I bumbled due to technology 2 sessions and really, felt my energy when context, choice, and connection, I wasn't offering simply by arriving to a session 10 minutes late. There was no context. There was no choice for the other autonomic nervous system, and definitely no chance for immediate connection. And so I practiced and thought it was so useful to have what we call, the act of rupture and repair, which really is a conversation between systems. And I thought how enlightening, because so much of what we communicate in ourselves to our brain, in our environment to our brain, and when we're in discussion with another autonomic nervous system. It's happening long before we open our mouths in every moment. And I love, Lauren, you bringing it this body, mind, and spirit, because my real aha place in the last couple of weeks is I've worked for 2 decades with a wonderful muscular therapist. I have a body that gets a little quirky from time to time. And probably since the beginning of the year, it's been quirky in my neck, which is, then holding tension, holding pain, holding discomfort, limiting, an ease with sleep, limiting an ease with many of the things that I love to do, just, whether it's cooking or swimming or whatever. Yeah. And I find I worked with my muscular therapist, and she's such a wise soul. And then she said, I think maybe a chiropractor would help. So I engaged this wonderful new chiropractor, and I went in and, things would last for a little bit, maybe a day, maybe 2 days. But I found this place of despair welling up in me. It's like, but I'm not really getting better. And please hear what was the missing ingredient in I'm not getting better. It's still hurting. And as much as I try, and now, I've got kinesio tape on my foot, and I went into my muscular therapist just this past week. And we talked again about the logistics of what was going on in my body. And then she said to me, Cameron, and it's really important to work in that good body conversation. And my jaw dropped, because all of a sudden she's speaking my language. What is my neuroception of my situation? What is happening between my body and my brain? And it was not a conversation of safety. I'm like, what's wrong with me? And I'm like, I'm in pain. I can't. And then, come on, you got to do better. You got to push. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I've spent the last 3, almost 4 months fighting myself, because I didn't realize within the struggle, and let's all be human here, once we're really engaged in that struggle, that wonderful ventral vagal is not accessible.
There.
And I feel like, the good body conversation was my invitation to really bring my body along and be present and engaged. And it has been phenomenal. We're now making progress after months of essentially banging my head against the wall, really. And I'm like, come on. But, that's where an update with ventral vagal allows the autonomic nervous system to perceive and shift where it formerly felt it didn't have all the ingredients, least of which was safety, which then takes us into those, contortions within our brain, within our body. And this piece of work that I am just welcoming has also taken me at a spirit level to the ways in which I tend to feel burdened. And these are old beliefs, and these are things I've learned through the legacy of my family, not all consciously, but I'm taking the opportunity to be in that awareness and that curiosity to what it feels like when I'm not feeling the burden. And is it possible to invite the burden, back into the history of from whence it came, and what's possibly true for me now, because it's the history of trauma, it's the sensitivity, and what it feels like in spaciousness when I have the safety, in spaciousness when I have a different context, and I feel choice. And it's just been, I have an ability to laugh at myself. It's like, of all people, Cameron, duh. Welcome home to yourself, when, this is the stuff I work with all the time, but couldn't see the forest for the trees. And now I'm doing it in an appreciative way.
And it feels so different, right, Cameron?
Completely. Night and day. I mean, that expression, I couldn't see the forest for the trees. I was like, I'm lost. I don't know what I'm doing. So much mobilization, so much triggering of old stuff, and the stories completely intensified the state.
Cameron, that's such a beautiful story of your journey and also co-regulation. But I think, the three of us have very different modalities that we practice, but there's a lot of also underlying similarity in the way that we hold space and show up for people. And I think it also, let's be honest, and like Cameron, you said, we are all human and we're all on this journey. And I think it's really good for our listeners also to understand that even though, we're on this autonomic journey and this practice in our personal and professional lives, this is the power of us showing up for each other and holding space for each other, that doesn't disappear just because this is part of our career. We're still on this journey, all of us.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yeah. And
Tell us more.
I think the vulnerability of that is actually very magnetic. I think there's a lot of power in that instead of weakness. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, speaking of journeys, as you both know, I just took the long journey because that is the only way to get between Europe and the US these days is by the long route. And but I had these two very different experiences that I thought highlighted this so beautifully at two different airports. Now, let's all take with us all the baggage we're all bringing already to showing up in an airport these days, right? Um, Even pre COVID, everyone shows up with a lot of emotional baggage at the airport, right? But now we have this um, constantly changing set of rules and thoughts and ideas of what would make us safe or what not. And I had these two, could not have been more polar opposite experiences. So let me start with the one that was not giving me cues of safety, nor was it giving anyone else in the area cues of safety. And this was at the Amsterdam airport. And you arrived at the gate for your flight, and there's a lot of new paperwork that's required now just within the last couple of weeks, and boarding procedures. And within the gate are all the people that are going to board the plane, but in a very unusual setting, they're all standing. Now, you don't normally see that. So right away, that sets off a cue of danger for me. Like, why is everyone standing? It's an hour and a half till the flight. What's going on? Usually that means the flight's canceled or, right, and everyone's standing. And then the delightfully overworked 4 or 5 flight attendants are milling around in the group asking questions. And of course, you don't know what question they're asking. And so you're trying to get in what's going on here, right? And they're handling people individually and putting some kind of sticker on their paperwork, and but in no order or no line or no like, so context completely gone, right? Off, just I have no idea. Choice, well, I know I have to be there, and I don't really have a choice how I'm going to do this because it already feels disorganized. And I'm connecting with every person there. What's going on? What are they doing? And what was really interesting was everyone there. Now we're talking about 150 people, probably. We're going through the same process over and again. So over the course of an hour, this built, and there was this sense of ill ease. Do we have what we need? Is something going to happen? And yet never was an overarching framework for context given, right? People boarded the plane still feeling ill at ease. It was palatable the entire flight. Like, is everything okay? What happened? There was never any clarity brought to the scene, and it included the whole onboarding process. So that's what that felt like. And in my body, I felt tense the entire time, tense on the flight. I couldn't quite come out of that mobilized, hyper alert, like, am I missing something? What's going on? We show up in Geneva Airport in Switzerland, completely different experience. And immediately I felt my whole body relaxing. So this is beautiful. Now, it is Switzerland. Immediately as you approach your gate, there's a monitor with a film going. and on the film is exactly what is going to be required of you in this process. And it's looping and it's not stimulating. It's very, one person, and they're actually walking through the process as if they were in the airport. You're going to go here, you're going to do this. This is what we're going to ask. And immediately I went, so did everyone around me. And you notice the noise level coming down because there wasn't this buzzing. There was this um, co-regulation even going on, just standing there together, like, oh, we're all together. We know what to do. We have our contacts. We can follow this. This is good. And everyone was able to sit down, relax, maybe even relax enough to read a book in a completely day and night situation. Nothing changed for the external environment, right? We still had all of these challenges we were faced. We still had the ill ease of traveling. And yet, by offering this very clear context, it shifted the whole game. To me, it could not have been a more clear example. And I was so filled with gratitude, right? At that point, like, thank you, whoever thought that was a good idea.
I have been exploring, thinking about these three: context, choice, and connection. And Lauren, what you're saying is really resonating for me and helping me to get a little deeper into this exploration, because when you were in Geneva and when you're in Amsterdam, the choice piece wasn't at play, right? You sort of had to be there. And it seems like we encounter a lot of situations in our day-to-day life where the choice piece might or might not be something that's in our control at that moment. So that then leaves these other two ingredients for us: the context and the connection. And Cameron, maybe you can help us explore this a little bit further, because it seems to me that the connection piece, in my situation that we started with, the connection piece was online right away, but it wasn't enough to get me to safety, because the context of getting up so early, or the idea of pounding the pavement and hurting my body, the context of it was such a no, that the connection wasn't enough. So it leaves me wondering, often in my personal experience, the context almost seems to be the root or the nucleus of this process for me sometimes. That if I can get the context to feel safe, that sometimes the other two organically shift. And I was reading something about proprioception as I was realizing what a big impact my body, and knowing where it is in space and whether that feels safe to me or not, and the rhythms of the way I move. So I was reading about proprioception this morning, and I was reading that it's often a sense, first of all, that we don't know about and we don't talk about and we're not aware about, but it creates organization for people in the brain, this proprioception. It's often thought about as the sense that creates safety through organization. And I thought, wow, because for me, context comes when I have a sense of what's expected, Lauren, like you said, or what it's going to look like, or the structure and organization of it, not in a rigid way, but just in an understanding way, helps that context to be there for me.
I feel it must be the root. But something came up for me, and Cameron, I'm jumping in, but I want to hear your feedback on this. I'm wondering how much that has to do with our histories. That I know for me, Megan, I would say 100% context rules. And that's because I came from a very chaotic background and child rearing ages. And context is everything. If I can get the context, I can figure out the other two one way or another. But I'm wondering, maybe for other people, connection is really the driver. Cameron, have you noticed a difference between these three in your work?
Yes, and it is uniquely biased by our former experiences, for
Sure.
better or worse. And just remembering the whole function of the autonomic nervous system is through neuroception and awareness, body, environment, and other autonomic nervous systems, is either for the invitation and the cues of safety, which easily allows us a lot of flexibility in discovering context, choice, and connection. Or if those cues for safety are not there, through neuroception, we won't have that enough ventral vagal, because if we're neuroception danger, and that's before it gets to our brains, we're going to already be minus enough ventral vagal to have perspective, curiosity, what's going on, what's missing, what do I need. And again, we're much like you in the airport, or trying to figure out, Megan, there's something missing here. There's not all those cues of safety were initially in place. That brings us back to that practice of naming and noticing, because that's that pause point between the cues that are coming up to our brain and the interpretation. And if there's not enough safety, if there's not enough ventral vagal, our brain is going to try to assign a story that looks like something we already have experienced. And if that previous experience was not a positive one and was not filled with safety, guess where we're going?
Exactly.
It's not a pretty picture, is it? But it's how biology works. It's working in the interest of, let's figure this out, especially if there's not enough cues for safety, because whatever's coming up to my brain kind of feels like, looks like something that already happened. So that's where our systems start to mobilize, or then mobilize with detachment, because it's just not available. And what our systems really need at that moment is enough ventral vagal within ourselves, within connection to other people, with connection to our environment, that allows us a little more safety. And then if any of those variables are still missing, we have the ability to look for it, to know what's missing, to potentially reach in or reach out or around.
You know, for our listeners, I think I'd like to really bring this home, in wrapping up our conversation on this, is how we can invite those in ourselves. I mean, obviously, there are situations that just make that challenging. I mean, if we take my personal example of the airport, there wasn't a lot I could have done. But I have found, when I don't understand the context, that is my weak link. And so making an effort on my part to understand the context in a place where I don't feel threatened and I'm not already mobilized has been brilliant in helping me um, move through situations that I might have avoided in the past.
Yeah. And it really is state precedes story. So we can really enrich that practice of noticing what state we're in. If we continue to be in a mobilized state, we're not going to have much access to finding that whatever the missing ingredient is. For you, it's that context. So what we hope to increase in skill, and while on our way to befriending our autonomic nervous system, is, wow, I'm really mobilized right now. And bring whatever we can in that awareness back to a little bit more, just even a little bit more ventral vagal, because then we can actually articulate to ourselves and perhaps others that, wow, context is missing for me. I'm not feeling safe in this moment. And that opens the door to finding context.
Exactly. Yeah. So, any last thoughts on this topic, ladies? Megan, what about you?
Yeah, thank you. I think that this has been a beautiful conversation. It's been an honest and a vulnerable conversation. And it leaves me really feeling more self-aware that, our autonomic nervous systems are unique to each of us and informed by our past. And starting to understand my own autonomic patterns and the ingredients that personal to me help me find safety in a moment and therefore access ventral in a moment, it has been, it has really shifted everything. It shifts my perception. And we all know the power of shifting your perception. And so thank you for this.
Yeah. And it's a conversation, and it's about the process,
Mhm.
because the piece for all of us is it's not magic. It's simply, and here I am, I have been studying and working with my autonomic nervous system for a decade. You know, I should know better, but sometimes it's that gentle vulnerability is like, something's missing right now. I'm not feeling, and simply how we can reapproach ourselves, or, you know, find, you know, even name with enough safety, just a little itty bitty bit to continue to hold whatever is happening.
Yeah, I think, Cameron, you told a beautiful part of your story that was about co-regulation with your muscle therapist. And
Mhm.
I just want to again reiterate that it is a practice, and that if you don't have somebody in your life who is talking about the autonomic nervous system or is on this journey with you, that tuning in, this is creating a space where you can co-regulate with us, and you can become more self-aware about your autonomic nervous system with us, just as we are each week.
Yeah.
And what I needed, which was so wonderful, that moment that the muscular therapist was working with me, what she said had meaning, but what the neuroception was, it's just, you know, Cameron, sometimes as she strokes the covers on her working table, our body just really needs, our system just really needs that good body. And my neuroception was already drawn to what was offered. And it can come full circle to having a cat on my shoulder. She decided she needed that, but all in that moment when we know something's missing, you know, to be able to appreciate that. And can we find it somewhere, somehow, someplace? Because sometimes connection, that third C, isn't available in another person, or isn't available in, you know, are within our body at that moment. So maybe it is a moment looking out the window at the beauty of nature, or it's touching something soft, whether it's an animal or a scarf, or smelling something. I mean, you know, any of those little wonderful ventral vagal anchors that just kind of help invite us back into that process.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'd really like to invite our listeners to continue on this journey with us and come co regulate with us. We're all learning together. We're learning how we heal, which is such an important lesson that we continue to learn all of our life. I would like to ask one thing of our listeners, and we want to get this wonderful message we're sharing out in the world. So you can help us. And there are three things you can do. You can share this with a friend, colleague, or family member. Get that link out there. You can leave a review on wherever you're listening to this podcast, which would be a wonderful gift to us. And then finally, you can subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And we would be so grateful for any of those steps you're willing to take. Ladies, thanks for your time again and for sharing so deeply. And I look forward to our next recording.